In the sprawling streets of Soweto, Chegofatso Pule grew up with a simple dream to be loved and to have a small family of her own. She believed that after the losses of her childhood, life would finally grant her something beautiful. And when she met Ntuthuko Shoba, a successful man with a charming smile, Chego thought she'd found the answer to all her longings. But she didn't know that this man would lead her while 8 months pregnant into a deadly trap, ending in a murder that would shock all of South Africa. Johannesburg, the economic heart of South Africa, is a city born from gold mines. Now a vibrant commercial hub, one of the most dynamic in Africa. Not far from its bustling pace lies Soweto, a vast township pulsing with the spirit of community, where the story of Chegofatso Pule begins. Chego was born in 1992, growing up happily in the embrace of her parents, alongside her 3 siblings in Soweto. But before she could graduate high school, tragedy struck. Both her father and mother passed away suddenly, leaving 4 children orphaned. From then on, Chego and her siblings moved in with their aunt, shouldering the responsibility of caring for her younger sister. She learned to swallow her own tears to dry those of her sister, setting aside her youth to keep the family from falling apart. The void left by that loss followed Chego into adulthood, nurturing in her a deep longing to be loved and protected. After years of striving to build a new life, Chego found joy in art, fashion, and makeup. She studied design and worked at a cosmetics store where her talent and charm quickly stood out, but inside, the emptiness in her heart remained unfilled. Until 2019, when fate brought Ntuthuko Shoba into her life. He came from a well-off family and worked as an IT specialist and stock analyst, earning around 36,000 rand a month, a high salary in South Africa. Ntuthuko's polished appearance and attentive gestures captivated Chego from their first meeting. Tall, impeccably dressed, and always the perfect gentleman, Ntuthuko knew how to make a woman feel special. He opened car doors for Chego, remembered her birthday, complimented her beauty even without makeup. He listened with genuine interest as she spoke about her work, held her when she mentioned her late parents, and whispered sweet words, "You're not alone anymore." For a woman who had grown up starved of love, these gestures were like a balm for the loneliness Chego had endured for years. In Ntuthuko's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen since losing her parents' unconditional care. Before long, they were in a serious relationship. But things were not as idyllic as they seemed. The early months of their relationship passed under a veneer of false happiness. Chego believed she had found true love, but in reality, she was living in an illusion crafted by a masterful manipulator. Behind his successful facade and perfect gestures, Ntuthuko Shoba was a playboy, deceiving multiple women at once. Chego was just one of his victims. The truth began to unravel one rainy October afternoon. Chego was at Ntuthuko's apartment, waiting for him to return from work. His phone, left on the table, buzzed repeatedly with messages. At first, she had no intention of looking, but when the screen lit up, she inadvertently saw the name Rosetta Mode appear multiple times, accompanied by sweet and intimate messages. Curious and uneasy, Chego picked up the phone. What she read felt like daggers piercing her heart. The messages revealed that Ntuthuko had ordered an engagement ring for Rosetta and had even opened a joint bank account to buy a new apartment. Chego stood there, trembling hands clutching the phone, reading each message as if reading her own death sentence. The world around her spun. Ntuthuko had been maintaining a serious relationship with Rosetta Mode from the moment he met Chego. Even more bitter was the realization of her true place in Ntuthuko's life. Through the messages, it was clear she was merely a passerby, a temporary distraction. Rosetta was the one Ntuthuko was serious about, the one he planned to marry. He had detailed plans for their wedding, from choosing the ring to booking the venue and buying a house. Plans Chego had once thought might one day be hers. When Ntuthuko returned and saw Chego holding his phone, he showed no panic or shame. Instead, he explained with a chilling calm, as if prepared for this moment. He didn't deny his engagement to Rosetta or show any remorse. Ntuthuko explained that Rosetta was his long-term plan, the woman he truly wanted to build a future with. His brutal honesty, devoid of empathy or understanding of the pain he was causing, was the mark of a completely selfish man. When Chego questioned why he had done this, Ntuthuko grew irritated that she had invaded his privacy. He emphasized that he had never promised her a future, that their relationship was only for the present. These explanations were like further blades slicing into Chego's already broken heart. Chego should have left. She should have packed her things, cried her heart out, and never looked back. But she couldn't, despite the bitterness. Chego stayed. Part of it was the depth of her feelings. She had loved Ntuthuko with all her heart, had believed in his sweet promises. Part of it was a fragile hope that time and devotion might change his mind, in Chego's mind. Perhaps if she was good enough, patient enough, loving enough, Ntuthuko would realize she was the one for him. But the deepest reason was fear. After the immense losses of her youth when she lost her parents, after years of sacrificing herself to care for her sister, Chego craved to hold on to the faint warmth of a relationship, however fragile and flawed. Loneliness had eroded her to the point that staying with Ntuthuko, even for a little longer, even as a mere stopgap, was better than facing the void alone. She didn't know this decision would lead her down a path from which there was no return. In the weeks that followed, Chego's life became a painful charade. She had to witness Ntuthuko continue preparing for his wedding to Rosetta right in front of her. But the most terrifying part was how Ntuthuko maintained his intimate gestures toward her. This duplicity left Chego increasingly confused and hurt. She no longer knew what was real or fake, or whether she was living in an illusion. Until one day in May 2019, a major turning point occurred. Chego discovered she was pregnant with Ntuthuko's child. The realization came one morning when she felt unwell and decided to take a pregnancy test. Seeing the two clear pink lines, Chego was overjoyed. She had always dreamed of having a child with the man she loved. Despite the complicated and painful relationship, in her mind, this baby could be the key to changing everything. Perhaps when he became a father, Ntuthuko would realize that she and the child were his true future. Perhaps the responsibility of fatherhood would make him mature and make the right decision. Perhaps his love for the child would extend to its mother. With all these hopes, Chego quickly shared the news with Ntuthuko, but his reaction was the complete opposite. Ntuthuko's face showed no joy or emotion. Instead, there was anger and panic. He looked at Chego as if she had just announced a disaster, something that could ruin his life. In Ntuthuko's mind, rapid calculations took place. This child could not be born if it threatened his marriage to Rosetta. If Rosetta found out he had a child with another woman, all his plans would collapse. The joint account, the new apartment, the planned wedding, everything would turn to nothing. Internally, Ntuthuko was furious that Chego had been careless enough to get pregnant. But outwardly, he remained calm. He knew that acting aggressively or cruelly might make her uncooperative. Instead, he exploited what he knew was Chego's weakness, her longing to be loved and her fear of abandonment. He sweet-talked her with the familiar tone she once adored. He said he understood what she wanted, but now wasn't the time. He asked her to terminate the pregnancy, wrapping the request in promises of a future together. He vowed he would always be by her side. That later, when things were stable, he would give her a child, deep down. Chego knew these promises were just to persuade her to comply, but she was too heartbroken to resist, too afraid to face the truth that she might lose both Ntuthuko and the child. Though Chego didn't want to. Ntuthuko's sophisticated manipulation, his promises, reassurances, gentle gestures, and especially her fear of complete abandonment led her to reluctantly agree. The decision to terminate the pregnancy broke Chego's heart. She felt as if she had killed a part of herself, betrayed her deepest maternal instincts. Ntuthuko, outwardly, appeared just as sad and pained. He held her tightly after it was over, saying he was heartbroken too and promising to always be there for her. These consolations, though possibly just an act, were the only thing helping Chego endure the pain. Shockingly, just a few months later, in early 2020, Chego became pregnant again. This time, seeing the familiar two pink lines. She didn't cry with joy as she had before. She cried out of fear, knowing Ntuthuko's likely reaction, but within that fear, a new resolve emerged, a strength born from the pain of the previous experience. She didn't want to terminate again. She truly longed for a child, a piece to complete her life, something that was hers alone, that no one could take away. This time, She had learned a costly lesson from before. She waited, keeping the pregnancy a secret until it was stable and too late for a safe termination. She carefully calculated, researching fetal development stages to ensure that when she told Ntuthuko, he would have no other choice. By February 2020, when the pregnancy was nearly 4 months along and stable, Chego decided to tell Ntuthuko. She sent a message asking to meet, saying she had something important to discuss. When they met, she informed him about the pregnancy and asked him to support and help care for the child. Ntuthuko's reaction made Chego feel as though she'd been slapped. He was furious that she had kept the pregnancy from him until it was too late. In his eyes, this was a calculated manipulation on her part, a reversal of roles he couldn't accept. He reacted negatively immediately, unwilling to take responsibility because he was fully committed to Rosetta in his mind. Calculations resumed. He didn't want this to affect his upcoming marriage. If Rosetta found out, she might call off the wedding, and all his future plans would collapse. But this time, the situation was different. The fetus had developed to a point where termination was medically dangerous and complex. Moreover, if he was too harsh or cruel, Chego might go public, causing a scandal that could damage his reputation and career. So Ntuthuko quickly changed tactics. He decided to adopt a different approach, appearing supportive to control the situation while secretly devising a way to resolve the issue on his terms. He sweet-talked her with the familiar, honeyed words. He said he understood and accepted her decision, that he would take responsibility as a father. He even discussed baby names with her and promised to care for her and the child. But what he did next was entirely different. His sweet promises quickly turned hollow. Though he promised to attend doctor's appointments, he never showed up. He always had an excuse: work was busy, an unexpected meeting, or simply forgetting. His apologies sounded sincere, accompanied by promises to make it up next time. But the next time brought only more promises. Chego persistently contacted him, sharing updates about her pregnancy, ultrasound results, and her emotions as a soon-to-be mother. She expressed her pain and disappointment at attending appointments alone, her determination to keep the baby no matter what, perhaps fearing Ntuthuko might push for another termination. She repeatedly affirmed her resolve. But Ntuthuko grew increasingly distant and irritated whenever she mentioned the pregnancy or the child. He began complaining that she was pressuring him, that she was too demanding, that he needed time to adjust to fatherhood. These criticisms completely inverted reality, making Chego feel like the guilty party. Their relationship deteriorated with each passing day. Chego was now in an extremely vulnerable state, not only physically due to pregnancy changes but also emotionally, as she was entirely dependent on Ntuthuko's support. She expressed her growing anxiety and despair to Ntuthuko. During sleepless nights, she called him in tears, begging him to stay in touch and show more care for their child. She said she only wanted him by her side during this critical time, that their child needed a father's presence. In response to her desperate pleas, Ntuthuko began providing financial support for medical checkups. He gave her money for prenatal vitamins, paid for doctor visits, and even bought some baby essentials. But he still didn't tell his family about the child, as he had promised her. Gradually, Ntuthuko shed the mask of the caring man Chego once loved. He no longer bothered to hide his annoyance when she mentioned the child. He acted tired and frustrated with her requests, as if caring for the woman carrying his child was an unwarranted burden. Worse still, in Ntuthuko's cold gazes, Chego began to sense something else, a darker intention she couldn't yet fathom the cruelty of. Strange things began happening as Chego's pregnancy progressed to week 29. One afternoon in May, her phone buzzed with messages from an unknown number, direct threats criticizing her for her relationship with Ntuthuko. The sender clearly knew intimate details about her situation, her pregnancy, Rosetta, even her home address. The messages came sporadically, sometimes during the day, sometimes late at night, all threatening and hostile. They demanded she stay away from Ntuthuko, even threatening the safety of her unborn child. But Chego had been through too much to be easily intimidated. She responded fiercely, showing no fear. She asserted her determination to protect her child, declaring that no one had the right to interfere in her life. When she informed Ntuthuko about the messages, he seemed unconcerned, suggesting they might be a prank or a mistake. His indifference only heightened Chego's unease. And then, the unthinkable happened. On June 4, 2020, Ntuthuko contacted Chego, saying he wanted to meet to discuss their child's future. His serious and earnest tone, so different from his recent coldness, gave her hope. The meeting at Ntuthuko's apartment took place in a tense atmosphere. He seemed irritated, talking about Rosetta's suspicions and pressure from his family. The argument escalated as Chego refused his demands and insisted she would raise the child alone if necessary. That evening, Chego called her Aunt Priscilla from Ntuthuko's apartment, saying they had argued and she was heading home. But she never arrived. Her worried family reported her missing to the police, and friends took to social media with the hashtag #FindChego. But there were no leads. 3 days later, on the morning of June 8th, a maintenance worker found Chego's body hanging from a tree in a remote veld west of Johannesburg. She had been shot in the chest, covered in blood, and was 31 weeks pregnant. The autopsy confirmed that both she and her unborn child were dead, with evidence that Chego was still alive when she was hanged, enduring her final moments in excruciating pain and fear. Upon receiving the devastating news of Chego's death, her family was paralyzed with grief. Aunt Priscilla collapsed upon hearing the news, unable to believe that the girl she had raised from childhood met such a tragic end. Mimi cried uncontrollably, blaming herself for not stopping her sister from meeting Ntuthuko that fateful night. Their grief was inconsolable over the sudden and brutal loss of their loved one. But amidst the pain, Chego's family immediately suspected Ntuthuko. They knew about the complex and toxic relationship between her and him. They recalled Chego's anxious calls, her sharing of Ntuthuko's changing behavior, following the family's tip. The police launched an investigation, when summoned for questioning. Ntuthuko was guarded and cautious. He repeatedly denied any involvement in the case, insisting he was entirely innocent. In his statement, he confirmed that Chego left his apartment after their argument on the evening of June 4th, claiming she had gone home safely. He stated he hadn't heard from her since. Ntuthuko remained calm and confident during interrogations, as if he had rehearsed his answers. He denied any motive for murder, claiming his relationship with Chego was casual and gave him no reason to harm her. But surveillance footage exposed his lies. When police reviewed footage from the apartment complex where Ntuthuko lived, they uncovered a completely different story. The footage showed Chego and Ntuthuko leaving the building at 10 p.m. on June 4th. However, they returned shortly after, then left again when a gray Jeep appeared. Notably, Chego appeared hesitant and uncomfortable as she entered the unfamiliar vehicle, while Ntuthuko returned to the building alone. Crucially, 3 minutes of critical footage were mysteriously missing, raising significant suspicion of deliberate tampering. This gap was clearly intentional, not coincidental. The police continued investigating the gray Jeep seen in the footage. Through vehicle registration records, they traced it to a woman. However, upon questioning, her boyfriend Muzikayis Malafane emerged as the primary suspect. Notably, Malafane was a high school acquaintance of Ntuthuko, establishing a critical connection. The police arrested Muzikayis Malafane on June 15, 2020, just a week after Chego's body was found. He was apprehended in Gauteng while traveling from Mpumalanga, showing signs of attempting to flee. After being charged with premeditated murder, Malafane initially denied all allegations. However, by February 2021, under pressure from evidence and a plea deal with the state, he confessed and agreed to become a key witness. Malafane's confession was the key to charging Ntuthuko Shoba. He provided a detailed account of the plot, explaining how Ntuthuko hired him to carry out the murder, the agreed payment, and the specific roles each played in the heinous plan. The investigation, led by Captain Bongani Mapete, gathered solid evidence, including CCTV footage, phone call records between Ntuthuko and Malafane, and other physical evidence. Each piece reinforced the others, building an irrefutable case against Ntuthuko Shoba, the mastermind who planned the murder of the woman carrying his child. With Muzikayis Malafane's critical confession, the police had sufficient grounds to arrest Ntuthuko Shoba. A month after Malafane's confession, Ntuthuko was arrested at his workplace. To the shock of his colleagues, he was taken to the police station, calm but steadfastly denying all charges. From the moment of his arrest, Ntuthuko maintained his innocence unwaveringly. He hired a skilled legal team and prepared a meticulous defense strategy. Throughout the pretrial period, he remained confident, acting like a man wrongfully accused. The trial of Ntuthuko Shoba officially began in July 2022 at the Johannesburg High Court. It was one of the most closely followed cases in South Africa, as it represented the gender-based violence crisis plaguing society. The prosecution presented a series of compelling evidence against Ntuthuko. First was the surveillance footage from the apartment complex, clearly showing Chego and Ntuthuko's movements on the fateful night. The footage captured Chego's hesitation as she entered the Jeep and Ntuthuko returning to the building alone. Another key piece of evidence was the phone call records. Investigators uncovered 24 calls between Ntuthuko and Muzikayise around the time of the crime. These calls occurred before, during, and after Chego's murder, indicating close coordination between the two men. Most critical was Muzikayise Malafene's detailed testimony. He revealed the entire brutal plan orchestrated by Ntuthuko. According to his testimony, Ntuthuko lured Chego with promises of buying clothes for their unborn child and invited her to dinner at his apartment to create a cordial atmosphere. Then, as planned, Muzikayise appeared, posing as an Uber driver to take Chego home. Instead, he drove her to a remote forest. There, he shot Chego at close range and then hanged her body from a tree to stage a fake suicide scene. Evidence also showed that Ntuthuko used a burner phone to communicate with Malafane to avoid leaving a trail. However, this backfired when location data showed both phones were always in the same place, proving Ntuthuko used both devices. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Ntuthuko Shoba and his legal team attempted a sophisticated defense. He testified that his relationship with Chego was not serious, merely a fling. This aimed to downplay any motive for murder if the relationship wasn't significant. Why would he kill her to hide an out-of-wedlock child? Ntuthuko insisted he was not the mastermind and had not hired Malafane to kill Chego. Instead, he claimed he handed Chego over to Malafane in good faith, believing Malafane would take her home safely. He said he thought Malafane was simply an Uber or taxi driver she had called. His defense team tried to discredit Malafane's testimony by pointing out minor inconsistencies in his account, particularly regarding the payment Ntuthuko allegedly promised. They argued these discrepancies showed Malafane was an unreliable witness. Ntuthuko also questioned the authenticity of electronic evidence, including WhatsApp messages and call data, suggesting they could have been fabricated or misinterpreted. However, the prosecution delivered strong and convincing rebuttals. They pointed out that Ntuthuko and Malafane had known each other for over a decade since high school. In this context, it was implausible for Ntuthuko not to recognize his old friend driving the car, moreover, as the partner of a pregnant woman. Ntuthuko's lack of concern about who was driving his girlfriend home late at night without verifying the driver's identity was highly suspicious and abnormal. Security footage was meticulously analyzed, showing Ntuthuko and Chego standing very close to Malafane's car. The prosecution argued that at such proximity, Ntuthuko would have recognized Malafane or at least heard his familiar voice, especially when Chego spoke to the driver. Ntuthuko's claim that he stood at a distance and couldn't see the driver clearly was completely debunked by the visual evidence. The prosecution used text and call evidence to prove the close connection between Ntuthuko and Malafane. Analysis showed they communicated before the murder to plan, during to coordinate, and after to handle the aftermath. The content of these conversations, though cleverly encrypted, clearly revealed the murder plot. This directly contradicted Ntuthuko's claim of no involvement and merely handing Chego over to a stranger. Despite the defense's attempts to discredit Malafane by highlighting minor changes in his account about the payment, the prosecution successfully defended their witness. They argued that Malafane provided a consistent and detailed sequence of events, corroborated by multiple independent pieces of evidence. With overwhelming and irrefutable evidence, the court delivered a harsh verdict. Ntuthuko Shoba was sentenced to life imprisonment for orchestrating premeditated murder. The judge emphasized his ruthless role as the mastermind, distinguishing it from Muzikayise Malafane, who, as the executor, received a 20-year sentence for cooperating with the investigation. Ntuthuko's defense team sought mitigating factors to reduce his sentence. They argued he didn't deserve life imprisonment and should receive a sentence similar to Malafene's. They submitted a social worker's report about Ntuthuko's family and life circumstances. However, prosecutor Fagra Mohammed rejected all mitigation arguments. He stressed that there were no exceptional circumstances to warrant reducing the maximum sentence under the law. He highlighted the extreme cruelty of the crime. Ntuthuko exploited Chego's trust and vulnerability as a woman carrying his child to hire someone to murder her brutally. On July 29, 2022, Judge Stuart Wilson delivered the final verdict in the silence of the courtroom. He described the murder as one of the worst crimes he had ever presided over. The judge dismissed all mitigation arguments from the defense and stated there was no reason not to impose the maximum sentence required by law. Ntuthuko Shoba was officially sentenced to life imprisonment for orchestrating premeditated murder. The sentence was not only punishment for a horrific crime, but also a strong message that society will not tolerate gender-based violence. Chego's family felt a measure of justice after months of suffering, though the pain of their loss would never fully heal. Chegofatso Pool became one of many victims of the gender-based violence crisis ravaging South Africa. The country has an alarming rate of violence against women. One woman is killed every 4 hours, with over 50% of cases perpetrated by intimate partners. This figure is 5 times the global average. The Chego's case, alongside others like Jade Panayotu and Uyinene Mrwetiana, sparked widespread outrage in the community but has yet to bring significant change. Experts advocate for comprehensive gender education and stricter punitive measures to address the issue at its roots. Chegofatso Pool was a talented young woman, soon to be a mother, loved by all around her for her warmth and supportive spirit. She left behind a grieving family, mourning friends, a promising career, and, most tragically, the chance to meet the daughter she loved before she was born. Her tragic case serves as a painful reminder of the reality of gender-based violence in South Africa, and her family continues to seek solace in the hope for a better future. The murder of Chegofatso Pool sparked nationwide outrage and fueled large protests against violence toward women. Her death became a poignant symbol of the gender-based violence crisis plaguing South Africa. It was not an isolated incident, but a stark example of a deeply systemic societal issue. Images of Chego with her bright smile and rounded pregnant belly became an emblem for thousands of other women living in fear. Her story is not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of the painful reality many South African women face daily. The strong response from the government and civil society underscores the case's profound impact. The South African government praised the verdict, commending the work of the police and judicial system. Officials acknowledged that the sentence sent a powerful message to those intent on harming women. The case also inspired the establishment of the Chegofatso Pool Foundation to support victims of domestic violence and raise community awareness. It brought greater attention to nonprofit organizations like Sonke Gender Justice, which have long fought for gender equality. The case of Chegofatso Pool serves as a grim microcosm of the broader gender-based violence crisis in South Africa. The public outrage and subsequent activism show that the case resonated deeply, encapsulating the painful reality endured by thousands of South African women. The judicial system's success in prosecuting this case stands as a symbol of hope and a symbolic victory. However, the persistence of gender-based violence indicates that legal triumphs, while significant, are not a complete cure for this deep-seated societal ill. Chegofatso Pool's legacy extends beyond a courtroom verdict, continuing to drive a broader movement for societal change. Her name will forever be remembered as a reminder that every woman deserves to live in safety, respect, and love. Chego's story is a call to action, not only to punish perpetrators, but to build a society where no woman must fear for loving, and no child must grow up without a mother.